It's one of the most shocking lawsuits to hit the Christian world this year. The founding pastors of Faith Life Church in Ohio, Gary and Drenda Keesee, their son Tom Keesee, and the entire church organization are now being sued by a woman who says she was SUED as a child, by the pastor's son himself. And what's worse, the lawsuit claims the parents, the very shepherds who preached faith, family, and financial freedom, knew about it and did nothing. The same couple that millions of viewers watched on Christian television are now being accused of reckless, willful, and wanton negligence. This isn't just a story about one family. It's a story about power, protection, and the price of silence inside the modern megachurch. In this video, we're breaking down the full story, what the lawsuit says, how the church is responding, and why this case could reshape how accountability works in American ministries. Gary and Drenda Keesee built their empire on one promise: to teach believers how to win in life, in faith, and in finances. Their church, Faith Life Church, located just outside Columbus, Ohio, became one of the fastest-growing congregations in the state. Their sermons mixed financial wisdom with spiritual authority. Their message? That God wants you prosperous, free, and debt-free. The elder Keesees also host a show on Daystar TV called Fixing the Money Thing. But behind the smiles, the cameras, and the financial seminars, a darker story was slowly unfolding, one that, according to court documents, began over 20 years ago. The Keesees' son, Gary Thomas Tom Keesee, was not just their child. He was being prepared as their successor, the heir apparent to the Faith Life legacy. He was the youth pastor, the media director, the face of the church's young generation. But prosecutors say, while he was leading worship and producing church musicals, he was also living a double life. The lawsuit, filed last Thursday in Franklin County, tells the story of a young girl, referred to only as OW, who says the abuse began when she was just 5 years old. For over a decade, from age 5 to 16, she says she endured repeated SA from Tom Keesee, her trusted youth pastor, and the son of the church's founders. And if that's not horrifying enough, the lawsuit claims Tom's parents, Gary and Drenda, knew what was happening. That they had already been warned after Tom allegedly abused at his own sister years earlier, yet still kept him in ministry. Those are not just words. In legal terms, they mean that the parents' actions weren't just negligent, they were deliberately indifferent. OW says she has suffered for years, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and is now seeking justice, not only for herself, but for every child whose cries for help went unheard. Faith Life Church wasn't just a place of worship. It was a family business. The lawsuit describes it as a tightly controlled environment, led by what it calls domineering leaders. It claims that Gary and Drenda used their influence and charisma to demand obedience and loyalty from members. Their family ran nearly every department of the church. Tom was the youth pastor and media head. Other family members worked in leadership. To outsiders, it was a thriving ministry. But to insiders, it was a dynasty, one that blurred the lines between spiritual authority and family protection. The document goes even further, calling Faith Life Church the alter ego of Gary and Drenda Keesee. In other words, it says the church had no real separation from the couple who ran it. That means if they protected their son, they were protecting themselves. So what do Gary and Drenda Keesee have to say about all this? According to their last public statement, which was made months ago when their son was first arrested, they claim the alleged abuse did not happen on church property. They say they are cooperating with law enforcement and will not be commenting until the criminal case concludes. Since the new civil lawsuit dropped, both the family's spokesperson and their attorney have declined to comment further. Meanwhile, Tom Keesee remains in jail, awaiting his November 18th trial date before Judge Richard Wetzel. He faces 32 criminal charges of SA and rape, with 4 identified victims, all of them minors at the time. These are serious criminal charges, and Tom Keesee is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The criminal trial will determine the facts of those charges. If convicted, Tom could spend the rest of his life in prison. Sadly, this isn't an isolated case. Over the last few years, we've seen a wave of painful stories: pastors accused, churches sued, ministries collapsing under the weight of silence and denial. The Keesee case is especially disturbing because it exposes what happens when family loyalty replaces biblical accountability. The lawsuit claims the Keesees were warned multiple times about Tom's behavior, but failed to report it. If true, that's not just a moral failure, it's a criminal one. The Bible reminds us, no matter how powerful, how popular, or how influential a ministry becomes, truth always finds its way to the light. In her filing, OW says she is not just suing for money, she's suing for justice. The document states she suffered lifelong physical and emotional trauma, medical expenses, lost wages, and deep spiritual pain. For her, this isn't about destroying a church, it's about confronting the silence that allowed ABUZ to thrive. When we hear these stories, it's easy to distance ourselves, to say, that's their church, not mine. But the truth is, this is a wake-up call for every believer. We must demand transparency, accountability, and compassion, not just for leaders but for the vulnerable among us. Cases like this should grieve us deeply, not just because of the allegations themselves, but because they remind us that no institution, no matter how outwardly successful, is immune to the possibility of ABUSE and cover-up. This case raises important questions. What accountability structures exist in our churches? How do we balance loyalty to leaders with protection of the vulnerable? And when allegations arise, do we respond with transparency and a commitment to truth, or with self-protection? Because the next time a child cries out for help, the difference between justice and tragedy might depend on who chooses to listen. The lawsuit against Gary and Drenda Keesee, their son Tom, and Faith Life Church is still developing. But regardless of how it ends, we will keep asking hard questions. What happens when a ministry becomes a family empire? Who holds pastors accountable when their own blood is involved? And how can the church rebuild trust when so many of its leaders have fallen? If you believe the church must return to righteousness and truth, then share this story. The world needs to see that God's people still care about justice. And remember, God will not be mocked. Every hidden thing will be revealed in His time. If you're new here, subscribe and join the Anointed Ones, because we will keep following this story as it unfolds in court. And as always, pray for the victims, pray for the church, and pray that truth will prevail.